Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving deep into a mystery that has, well, haunted mountainsides and history books for over 60 years. The Dyatlov Pass incident.
It's a story that starts in the winter of 1959, high in the remote Ural Mountains.
In the Soviet Union, yeah.
9 highly experienced Russian hikers, led by Igor Dyatlov, they set up camp on a slope called Kolotsiakh.
Which the indigenous Mansi people called the Mountain of the Dead.
Exactly. And the evidence they left behind is it's the most terrifying and contradictory set of facts you could possibly imagine.
The details are what really, cemented this as this enduring mystery.
Oh, absolutely. When search teams finally found the site weeks later, they walked into a scene that just defied all basic logic.
They find a tent.
They find a tent not ripped by an animal or crushed slowly by snow, but deliberately sliced open.
From the inside.
From the inside. And leading away from it, you have footprints, some barefoot, some just in socks descending calmly down the slope.
Into temperatures that meant certain death.
And then, of course, the bodies. That's the part that really, it drove the conspiracy theories for decades.
You've got victims with these catastrophic internal injuries. We're talking crushed ribs, massive fractures.
Right.
And yet there's almost no external damage, no bruising. How is that even possible?
It's a physical paradox. And it created this vacuum that was immediately filled with secret military tests, infrasound weapons.
And worse.
And worse. Our mission today is to move past all of that. We're going to apply the latest in physics, forensic medicine, and environmental science to the evidence.
To turn this mystery into, an understandable, if heartbreaking, system failure.
Exactly.
That's a fantastic mission. And I think we have to start right where the fear started, at the scene.
Yeah.
That tableau of terror.
The scene really is the narrative map. Dyatlov's group, they pitched this big canvas tent on an exposed, windy slope.
And when the searchers found it, it was already partly snowed in.
It was. But the key feature was these long, ragged cuts in the canvas.
And experts confirmed they were made from the inside.
From the inside, with knives. It suggests this desperate, immediate need to escape. They weren't fumbling with zippers, they were getting out.
But it wasn't a panicked stampede down the mountain. The footprints were orderly.
They were. They showed a group walking, mostly in single file, heading down the slope toward the cover of the nearest tree line, about a mile away.
That's crucial, right? The lack of scattered footprints suggests it wasn't just complete, uncontrolled chaos.
Right. They were executing some kind of emergency plan. Something compelled them to leave, but they left with a purpose, at least initially.
I saw that. So let's get to the terrible outcome. There were 2 groups of victims found.
That's right. The first 5 were found near a small fire, having clearly died of hypothermia. They were shockingly underdressed.
But the other 4, the ones they found months later in that ravine, that's where the real contradiction is.
That's the core of it. These individuals had profound, non-penetrating injuries. Massive chest fractures, broken ribs, one with a skull injury.
And the force required to do that is, like a car crash?
Exactly. It's comparable to a high-speed car accident.
But if you get hit by something that hard, how is your skin not torn open? Why no severe bruising? It just defies common sense.
And that is the cornerstone of the 60-year mystery. And it's also where we can finally apply physics to get an answer.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Let's talk about the physics of that forced escape, the Slab Avalanche theory.
Right. And most people, when they hear avalanche, they picture this, roaring river of snow sweeping everything away.
Yeah, a huge wall of white.
This wasn't that. The evidence points to something called a slab avalanche, which is far more insidious.
Okay, so explain that mechanism for us. What is a slab avalanche?
Imagine the tent on that steep slope. You get these specific snow conditions where a cohesive plate of dense, packed snow, the slab forms on top of a weaker layer underneath.
So not the whole mountainside is moving, just this one section.
Precisely. The slab might only be a few feet thick, maybe just the size of their tent, but because that snow is so dense, it can weigh several tons. And when that plate fractures and settles suddenly onto the tent, It applies this immense, non-penetrating force evenly across the whole surface.
So if you're inside, lying down, maybe pinned against your skis or something hard.
You're caught between the massive force of the slab above and the hard ground below. The force is distributed, not focused like a punch.
Which is why the skin doesn't break.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The soft tissues can absorb that distributed pressure, but the bone structure, the ribs, the skull, it just can't withstand the sheer crushing weight.
Wow, okay, that makes total sense. So the paradox, severe internal injury, minimal external damage, is explained by this high-pressure, non-penetrating weight.
It turns a conspiracy into a physics problem.
And it also explains why they cut the tent.
It does. If you're a skilled mountaineer and you hear that crack, you feel tons of pressure on your shelter. You know you are seconds, maybe minutes from being buried alive.
So cutting the tent wasn't panic, it was protocol.
It was a logical, if ultimately deadly, move executed under extreme duress. Get out fast. Forget your boots, forget your coat, just get out.
Their training kicked in. Survival in that moment meant getting air, not staying warm.
Right.
That completely recontextualizes their actions. But then they're outside, and they face the next enemy, hypothermia.
And once you're outside, exposed to that wind and those temperatures with hardly any clothing, the clock is ticking fast.
And hypothermia isn't just being cold, is it? It's a neurological failure.
It is. As your core temperature drops, your brain starts to fail. And the first things to go are judgment, reasoning, planning.
So they were making these irrational decisions, like walking away from shelter barefoot because their brains were literally shutting down.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Catastrophic cognitive collapse. Which brings us to maybe the most bizarre detail for the searchers, the fact that some were found nearly naked.
I think most people really struggle to grasp that part. How can you be freezing to death and take your clothes off?
This is a documented phenomenon. It's called paradoxical undressing.
Okay.
In late-stage hypothermia, the body's temperature regulation system completely fails, and you get this final dramatic surge of warm blood to the skin's surface.
So even though they're freezing inside, their skin feels like it's on fire.
Absolutely. The brain misinterprets the sensation as intense overheating. The victims feel this compulsion to remove their clothing, genuinely believing they are hot.
That is just a cruel trick of the mind.
It's an internal betrayal by your own feeling system.
And what about how they were found? The positioning of the bodies?
That points to the second forensic clue, terminal burrowing. It's this instinctive, primitive brain response.
Like an animal instinct.
Very much so. The victims try to crawl into enclosed spaces, under trees, into snowdrifts, or, like the four we've been talking about, deep into the shelter of a ravine.
So they weren't consciously hiding. They were just being driven by this primal urge to find enclosure before they died.
It's striking how perfectly the final movements of the Dyatlov group align with these documented stages of hypothermia.
Okay, I have to play the skeptic again.
Yeah,
Because this is the detail that always drags the mystery back into the grotesque.
I know which one you mean.
The missing tongue, the missing
Oh.
eyes, the soft tissue damage to their faces. I mean, that sounds like something far beyond an environmental accident. That sounds like mutilation.
And that element is what has sustained the conspiracy theories for so long. It feels deeply unnatural. But again, you have to look at the context. When and where were those specific bodies found?
They were the last four. The ones found in May, months later.
Exactly. Unlike the first bodies found near the fire, these four were buried deep under meters of packed snow and ice. And crucially, they were in a ravine.
And when the spring thaw came.
That ravine would have become a channel for flowing meltwater.
So they were trapped in a dark, cold, wet environment for months.
And that prolonged exposure, plus the running water, it drastically accelerates postmortem degradation. Soft tissues, especially mucous membranes like the tongue and the eyes, they're the first to go.
But can simple meltwater really remove a tongue? I mean, people hear that and they see a knife or animal teeth.
Well, we can't rule out small scavengers getting to the bodies once decomposition started. They often target soft, exposed tissue first.
Right.
But the crucial point is that this damage is postmortem. It happened after they died. It's not what killed them. The timeline and the location. They explain the degradation that seems so bizarre.
Wow. Okay. That just brings so much clarity to it. The horror movie detail turns out to be a slow environmental process.
Science strips away the fear by providing context.
Okay, let's quickly address the two last pieces that always feed the speculation. The orange orbs in the sky, which connects to the infrasound theory.
Yes, witnesses in the area did report seeing strange orange lights or orbs around that time. This led researchers to look at the physics of the mountain itself.
Kolachal.
The mountain's specific shape, when hit by strong wind, can generate something called a Kármán vortex streak.
That sounds technical.
It's just a term for a repeating pattern of swirling air vortices, and when that happens, it can produce infrasound.
Sound that's too low for humans to hear.
Exactly. You don't hear a roar, you hear nothing.
But you feel it.
You absolutely feel it. Infrasound vibrates the human eyeball, which can cause visual distortions, maybe even light halos or orbs.
Ah, they're audio orbs.
Potentially. And more critically, these low frequencies stimulate the amygdala, the brain's fear center. Exposure can induce this profound irrational anxiety and dread, a sense of impending doom.
So if the slab avalanche was the physical trigger, the infrasound was the psychological accelerant. It just amplified the fear to a primal level.
It provides a mechanism for that extreme collective fear that complements the physical trauma. No aliens needed.
Okay, last one. The radiation. The reports noted elevated levels of radiation on some of the clothes.
This one is maybe the most misused detail. The forensic analysis concluded the levels were nowhere near high enough to cause radiation sickness.
So it's just incidental.
Most likely, yes. Several of the hikers worked in industrial or research jobs that involved radioactive materials. Contamination from their work clothes packed with their hiking gear is a really plausible and scientifically mundane explanation.
So the radiation was a red herring. It's incidental, not causal.
Precisely. Every single element, the injuries, the behavior, the degradation, it all aligns perfectly with known phenomena. No unknown forces required.
So what does this all mean? We started with this supernatural 60-year mystery. We end with a scientifically coherent narrative.
It wasn't a military cover-up. It wasn't a monster.
There's chain reaction. A slab avalanche caused trauma and forced an evacuation. Hypothermia, possibly amplified by infrasound, dismantled their minds. Nature just exploited human limits.
It is a devastating case study. It shows how even highly trained people under extreme stress and complex physical forces can be forced into decisions, like cutting a tent and fleeing barefoot, that lead directly to their own demise.
Our provocative thought for you tonight builds on that. If your brain, the very tool you rely on for survival, starts to fail you because of the cold, how thin is the line between following survival protocol and giving into a primal, lethal panic? What would you do if your own body betrayed you in the dark?